Hi, it's Susan from Worldpeacefull Empowerment. I'm going to now read the second book, and I'm actually going to show you the title here, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. This has just come across my path. The Fight for a Human Future at the New Frontier of Power, it's called. Now, the part I just opened up at randomly, which I felt quite keen to read, and I thought I'll just read it with you. We will discover it together. It's called What is Surveillance Capitalism? And this is the subject matter I just finished off with in the last one. As I've pointed out to people, I'm a former market analyst. I was an analyst for 10 years. I really explored data very deeply, and I also had to look into ethical issues when I was filming within a supermarket environment for commercial reasons. And we can get blinded by the money we can make out of these things. We tend to sideline ethical issues because what the client wants is what the client gets. This is the nature of business. It's all about becoming successful and making money. But the surveillance area is a movement into the intimate lives of other human beings without their permission. And it has all sorts of ramifications for the society, for the quality of life, and for the sense of privacy that every individual needs to feel. There is nothing worse than feeling that your life is being interrogated. As I said in my previous video, I've been in the experience of being surveilled, and it did create trauma for me because there's no way you can go to the person and resolve the issue. They just keep surveilling you, believing that it's entirely appropriate without you having any say over why this is happening. You can never have a private conversation with a family member. You can't tell your feelings, or if you accidentally blurt it out, then they've recorded it. And I recognise, because it's happened to me, it's happening to everybody because of this online surveillance that we're seeing. The fact that even with some of the iPhones, apparently you can ring an iPhone, even if the person doesn't answer, the other person can still hear what the person's talking about. This could create all sorts of manner of conflicts. There's also that sense of, it's disrespectful. And certainly from my generation, they'd say it's rude, to tap into someone like this. And then if you're a person who has an agenda, you may then turn that information into a weapon to destroy another human being. Is that the sort of society we want? This is a form of covert violence. We can't on the one side say we want a society that's peaceful and non-violent, and then on the other side create scenarios where people's privacy is breached, people are being covertly bullied or overtly bullied through technology, certainly online, the children in respect of cyber communications on social media. Children are being ganged up on. Some children are suiciding. So deaths are happening as a result of this breach and using technology in such a way that causes harm. I'm a peacemaker, so from my perspective, what I'm interested in is dialogue, community communication around these matters, to bring into the conversation those who are surveilling with those who have been surveilled, I think would be a really interesting dynamic. This is how you build bridges, and it's also a way of developing empathy, because when you're behind a camera, you disconnect from the object. In fact, that person becomes objectivized. Anyone that's had any dealings with domestic violence or abuse, always at the essence of that is an object. The person is seen as an object, not a human. Now, if you over-identify intellectually, you're going to disconnect emotionally. And we do find that on gender. Women are encouraged to feel their feelings and express it. Men are typically encouraged to suppress their emotions as it's seen as weak. There's many sort of catch cries in our narrative where a bloke is put down if he's called a girl. I mean, this is an insult from a female perspective because he showed emotions. And other men actually isolate more gentler men if they exhibit real feeling states. And I think that's a real shame. It's not including all people, and that harder element, which is seen as, man up or, strong or whatever, is not. It's actually suppressing the greater part of yourself, which is the feeling side. It's not a side to be shut down. It's the side to be opened up if peace is our objective in the world and happiness. So let's look at surveillance capitalism and what impact that has. Surveillance capitalism unilaterally claims human experience as free raw material for translation into behavioural data. Although some of these data are applied to product or service improvement, the rest are declared as a proprietary behavioural surplus fed into advanced manufacturing processes known as machine intelligence and fabricated into prediction products that anticipate what you will do now, soon, or later, and later. Finally, these predictive or prediction products are traded in a new kind of marketplace for behavioural prediction that I call behavioural futures markets. Surveillance capitalists have grown immensely wealthy from their trading operations, for many companies are eager to lay bets on our future behaviour. As we shall see in the coming chapters, the competitive dynamics of these new markets drive surveillance capitalists to acquire ever more predictive sources of behavioural surplus. Our voices, personalities, and emotions. Eventually, surveillance capitalists discover that the most predictive behavioural data come from intervening in the state of play in order to nudge, coax, tune, and herd behaviour towards predictable outcomes. Competitive pressures produced this shift in which automated machine processes not only know our behaviour, but also shape our behaviour at scale. With this reorientation from knowledge to power, it is no longer enough to automate information flows about us. The goal now is to automate us. Now that's a very, very important issue. In this phase of surveillance capitalism's evolution, the means of production are subordinate to an increasingly complex and comprehensive means of behavioural modification. In this way, surveillance capitalism births a new species of power that I call instrumentalism. I'll just read that again. Instrumentarianism. I can't read that. It's pretty long. It's interesting. Instrumentarian. It's instrumentarian. So it's a little bit different from what I've read before. Instrumentarian power knows and shapes human behaviour towards other ends. Instead of armaments and armies, it works its will through the automated medium of an increasingly ubiquitous computational architecture of smart network devices, things, and spaces. So the smart, you'll see the word smart everywhere. This is part of a marketing push to familiarise the public with the word smart as they create the smart cities. In Australia, if you go to the Department, I think it's of Infrastructure and Cities, you'll see information about city deals there, what is actually happening in the drive to implement these cameras, these sensors, smart buildings, smart meters. This is all part of a NBN type network, wireless network, which gathers data in a myriad of ways through cameras, through heat sensors, through drones, through devices within buildings. That could be lighting systems, through the local area networks via the smart meters. You plug something in, like a computer, and it can be seen. It's a little bit like if you're talking to an IT company when you're trying to work out your software and you see them come onto your computer. Well, how do they do that? They do it through the electricity, don't they? They come in that way. And all you have to say is, yes, you can access my computer, which means I can access your computer anytime. And this is something we've got to get wise about. It goes on to say, in the coming chapters, we will follow the growth and dissemination of these operations and the instrumentarian power that sustains them. Indeed, it has become difficult to escape this bold market project, whose tentacles reach from the gentle herding of innocent Pokemon Go players to eat, drink, and purchase in the restaurants, bars, fast food joints, and shops that pay to play in its behavioural futures market to the ruthless expropriation of surplus from Facebook profiles for the purposes of shaping individual behaviour. They're shaping behaviour. This is the prosumers. Whether it's buying pimple cream at 5:45 p.m. on Friday, clicking yes on an offer of new running shoes as the endorphins race through your brain after your long Sunday morning run, or voting next week. Just as an industrial capitalism was driven to the continuous intensification of the means of production, so surveillance capitalists and their market players are now locked into the continuous intensification of the means of behavioural modification and the gathering might of instrumentarian power. Certainly the words mind control came to me just as I was reading that. Surveillance capitalism runs contrary to the early digital dream, consigning the aware home to ancient history. The aware home being, I guess you open the door, the door opens, using voice recognition. There's lots of technologies now where lights on, lights off, through a command. It says instead it strips away the illusion that the networked form has some kind of indigenous moral content, that being connected is somehow intrinsically pro-social, innately inclusive, or naturally tending toward the democratisation of knowledge. Digital connection is now a means to others' commercial ends, and this is to be highlighted. This is about commercialism. It's got nothing to do with sustainability. If we were to seriously be sustainable, I know from my time working in southern France on a permaculture property and having an agricultural mono production next door, I saw very clearly sustainability in companion planting, living off the land, self-reliance, the real self-reliance, solar panels, collecting water. This was getting closer to where need equals want, growing your own vegetables, having chooks or chickens. They call them chicken tractors under permaculture. Bill Mollison created that. He's an Australian CSIRO scientist. You might want to check it out. Now, that's the real sustainability. The monoculture that I saw when I looked across into the neighbour's field had been completely harvested. You could easily do, I'm getting the word algorithm on the harvesting of data, in the same way that it's a bulk processing production of gathering this data, which has accorded value, so it's the new currency is what they're calling it, and then it's sold off to others who want the data. It's a business, and that's what this is trying to stipulate. At its core, surveillance capitalism is parasitic and self-referential. It revives Karl Marx's old image of capitalism as a vampire that feeds on labour, but with an unexpected turn. Instead of labour, surveillance capitalism feeds on every aspect of a human's experience. I certainly got that inspiration myself. What did I call it? It was like leech. And I say that even with respect to those in this business. This is not personal. I'm just saying that it's about sucking the life out of something. And greed can be the great purveyor of that when you get caught up in all the fame, the money, the endless algorithms, and you just go, you just shut out anything that might be ethically questioning you because you don't want the ride to end. And that's what humans do. We do it all the time. But the thing is, because you're doing it on such a massive scale, the implications are massive. And if the worm turns, which it is, it will come back on you. So you have to be deeply connected to yourself. And I'm talking emotional intelligence here. It's not good enough to just lock yourself in a room and become an expert at algorithms and coding and mathematics or STEM science, technology, engineering, and maths, disconnected from empathy, feeling a sense of awareness to your fellow human being, a sense of creativity. This all gets unplugged, if you like, in a Brave New World scenario where sameness and predictability is required. The Orwellian image is coming up for many people, not just me. 1984, where the Orwellian face comes out and is dictating to the masses its behaviour, and if it contravenes what it's been instructed to do, then there is a consequence. They could be beaten up, they could be jailed. Whole range of consequences are issued forth. This is not the sort of world we want. We're on the precipice, I think, of great change in a possible future of a more civilised, evolved society where things like peace education are not sidelined but actually embraced as the centrepiece of that society, where values are valued above profit. So the quality of a character in a person is far more respected than someone who's sitting in a condominium having made their money either illegally or in a way that has simply profited self-interest without improving the greater good of humanity. These are the really prevailing viewpoints to consider. It's really the meaning in the life purpose. Everyone's playing their part in this, but ultimately we're here to awaken together. And that means those who are promulgating this smart cities revolution and those behind those who are doing it, and the impact on the whole of humanity. There are many confronting issues that are coming out of all of this, and it is spreading around the world. It goes on to say here that Google invented and perfected surveillance capitalism in much the same way that a century ago General Motors invented and perfected managerial capitalism. Google was the pioneer of surveillance capitalism in thought and practice, the deep pocket for research and development, and the trailblazer in experimentation and implementation. But it is no longer the only actor on this path. Surveillance capitalism quickly spread to Facebook and later to Microsoft. Evidence suggests that Amazon has veered in this direction, and it is constantly a constant challenge to Apple, both as an external threat and as a source of internal debate and conflict, because certainly those inside the IT industry, the big high I-tech companies, are having debates, and some of the pioneers at the very top are really concerned about where this is going. It's sort of letting the genie out of the bottle in a lot of ways. I'm getting coefficient. It's funny, pi comes up as well for me when I just said that. It's like a runaway train, the iPhones, the addictions. I mean, I watch the people and I cannot believe how many people are staring at their phones. From the point of view of cold, calculated, disconnected capitalism, they'll be going, beauty, great, we've got them. From the perspective of self-actualization, living your life purpose, experiencing your talents and dreams, it is a nightmare scenario because the people are not connecting to their fellow human beings. Yes, they might be remotely connecting to what they considered to be what we called in peace studies an imagined community. That was states, nations, and security that I studied, and the imagined community is the one that we think is our community, but they're just imagined. The real community are the people that are actually sitting with you and around you. So the danger with the IT, and this is why I often call it an unreal, it's not a real reality, is that you're connecting with those you have no real physical, emotional connection to, although emotions come into it. The deliberate designing of algorithms and interactions with avatars to give them a sense of emotion so that you bond, this is a real artificial form of connection, and it's an empty one. It's based on deception because that algorithm, that that avatar does not love you. But because you're an emotional being, you will think that there's a connection when there's not. And at the end of that person's life, it's pretty depressing to realise that your life was empty and it was all imagined. So let's continue on with this. As the pioneer of surveillance capitalism, Google launched an unprecedented market operation into the unmapped spaces of the internet, where it faced few impediments from law or competitors, like an invasive species in a landscape free of natural predators. Its leaders drove the systematic coherence of their businesses at a breakneck pace that neither public institutions nor individuals could follow. Google also benefited from historical events when a national security apparatus galvanised by the attacks of 9/11 was inclined to nurture, mimic, shelter and appropriate surveillance capitalism's emergent capabilities for the sake of total knowledge and its promise of certainty. In my poem that I've just done, I've uploaded videos today, I talked about the importance of uncertainty. So you may want to check that out. Surveillance capitalists quickly realised that they could do anything they wanted, and they did. So this is a sense of total freedom. They can just do what they want. There's no ethics, nothing constraining them. They dressed it in the fashions of advocacy and emancipation, which means freedom, appealing to and exploiting contemporary anxieties. So if you're an anxious person, look here, we'll soothe you. We'll get likes. You get lots of likes for Facebook. That'll soothe you. You'll get to escape into videos that people have put online that make you feel good. Maybe it's puppy dogs or whatever, without really looking into the real source of your anxiety, what's causing it. While the real action was hidden off stage, theirs was an invisibility cloak, bit of Harry Potter there, woven in equal measure to the rhetoric of the empowering web, the ability to move swiftly, the confidence of vast revenue streams, and the wild, undefended nature of the territory they would conquer and claim. They were protected by the inherent illegibility of the automated processes that they rule, the ignorance that these processes breed, and the sense of inevitability that they foster. Surveillance capitalism is no longer confined to the competitive dramas of the large internet companies, where behavioural futures markets were first aimed at online advertising. Its mechanisms and economic imperatives have become the default model for most internet-based businesses. Eventually, competitive pressure drove expansion into the offline world, where the same foundational mechanisms that expropriate for online browsing, likes and clicks, are trained on your run in the park, breakfast conversation, or hunt for a parking space. Today's prediction products are traded in behavioural futures markets that extend beyond targeted online ads to many other sectors, including insurance, retail, finance, and an ever-widening range of goods and services companies determined to participate in this new and profitable markets. Whether it's a smart home device, what the insurance companies call behavioural underwriting, or any one of thousands of other transactions, we now pay for our own domination. We now pay for our own domination. And this is what happens when people don't speak up or get informed. I know people are busy, but it's an absolute imperative that people start to educate themselves about what's going on around them, for the sake of their children, if nothing else, or their friends. Surveillance capitalism's products and services are not the objects of a value exchange. They do not establish constructive producer-consumer reciprocities. Instead, they are the hooks that lure users into their extractive operations, in which our personal experiences are scraped and packaged as the means to others' ends. We are not surveillance capitalism's customers. Although the saying tells us, if it's free, then you are the product. If it is free, then you are the product. Interesting. That is also incorrect. We are the sources of surveillance capitalism's crucial surplus, the objects of a technologically advanced and increasingly inescapable raw material extraction operation. We are the objects. Internet of Things. things, objects. It's very much, in my view, the expansion of objects, not people, because you're disconnecting the social emotional state. Surveillance capitalism's actual customers are the enterprises that trade in its markets for future behaviour. That's the customers, not you. This logic turns ordinary life into the daily renewal of 21st century Faustian, that's Faust, he's a philosopher, compact. Faustian, because it is nearly impossible to tear ourselves away, despite the fact that we must give in return, that what we must give in return will destroy life as we have known it. Something to ponder there. Consider that the internet has become essential for social participation, that the internet is now saturated with commerce, and that commerce is now subordinated to surveillance capitalism. Our dependency is at the heart of the commercial surveillance project, in which our felt needs for effective life vie against the inclinations to resist its bold incursions. This conflict produces a psychic numbing that inures us to the realities of being tracked, passed, mined, and modified. It disposes us to rationalise the situation in resigned cynicism, create excuses that operate like defence mechanisms. I have nothing to hide. I've heard that before. Until they get on welfare and they are forced into work they don't want to do and they say no and everyone ignores them, and then they're profiled and cut off. See, what people are not understanding, it's not about criminality, it's about choice. If you allow a compliant society to grow up around you, you won't have a right to say no. That's actually what's at stake here. And that's why democracy keeps coming up, because it says that we have a right to freedom of speech, we have a right to welfare, you know, we have a right to association, you know, there's a whole range. We have a right to be not discriminated against, etc., etc. Surveillance capitalism operates. Hang on, I'm just going to go back a bit here. It says, I've nothing to hide, or find other ways to stick our heads in the sand, choosing ignorance out of frustration and helplessness. Now, I've already heard about learned helplessness, and it's actually on my Happiness Australia website. I was promoting that. Not learned helplessness, but more optimism, in actual fact. Happiness was what I was interested in. And that is part of the psychology here, is to create learned helplessness, that you have no power. So when you tick the box, you only have the right to tick the box. You can't say, no, I don't agree with those terms and conditions. That doesn't suit me. They'll just say no access. And that's the capitalism that's being created here. No access if you don't agree with them. So even if you think it's wrong, you can't say a thing. And because it's global, how do you take them to court? If you don't have any money, where are you going to go with it? So in this way, surveillance capitalism imposes a fundamentally illegitimate choice that 21st century individuals should not have to make. And its normalisation leaves us singing in our chains. I see the iPhones as a way of chains. That's why I've gotten rid of my phone. I'm also seeing it as a surveillance device because it's happened to me. And I don't wish to be tracked. I'm a female. I don't want to be stalked by people I don't know because I dare to speak up and say what's true for me. That's my democratic right. I shouldn't be surveilled for it. But because of the mindsets who are not democratic, who are into control, this is why the surveillance is happening more and more. They want control. They've lost touch with why society became democratic and why it's important. There is a belief that the consumers, all their job is to consume and work, not that they have a life purpose or, you know, heartfelt passions or their own brilliance to contribute to the world, which goes way beyond business. This is about the evolution of humanity in a whole myriad of ways. That's being curtailed in this type of framework that sees consumption and production and surveillance as a means of profiling in order to maximise more money, more profits. It goes on to say that surveillance capitalism operates through unprecedented asymmetries in knowledge and the power that accrues to knowledge. Surveillance capitalists know everything about us, whereas their operations are designed to be unknowable to us. And that's another issue I have, is non-disclosure agreements in businesses, their privacy being protected, they employing cyber experts to protect their data, yet ours are not protected because we don't have the funds to do it. So there's a disproportionate situation happening here. So we can't know anything. Freedom of information is watered down. You cannot access data from public institutions who are being corporatised. So you can't find out what's been done to you, but they can then affect your life because they've got the resources and staff to do it. That's not fairness, and that's not justice, and that's not going to create social order. They accumulate vast domains of new knowledge from us, but not for us. They predict our futures for the sake of others' gain, not ours. As long as surveillance capitalism and its behavioural futures markets are allowed to thrive, ownership of the new means of behavioural modification eclipses ownership of the means of production as the fountainhead of capitalist wealth and power in the 21st century. These facts and their consequences for our individual lives, our societies, our democracies, and our emerging information civilization are examined in detail in the coming chapters. The evidence and reasoning employed here suggests that surveillance capitalism is a rogue force driven by novel economic imperatives that disregard social norms and nullify the elemental rights associated with individual autonomy that are essential to the very possibility of a democratic society. Just as industrial civilization flourished at the expense of nature and now threatens to cost us the earth, an information civilization shaped by surveillance capitalism and its new instrumentarian power will thrive at the expense of human nature. Yes, my blog is called Peace is Our True Nature. I'm very much aware of what's being lost to us here through this surveillance capitalism. It's very, very concerning. He goes on to say, and will threaten to cost us our humanity. Absolutely true. That's why I'm doing the videos. That's why I'm writing my blogs. That's why I'm speaking up, because I can see that we're losing something very, very valuable here, which is our humanity. And that's the very thing that I've loved about being here on the earth, is to share my humanity with others when I clowned around the world, when I went into orphanages and nursing homes, on the streets, when I went on radio and communicated with the people and learned from their aspects of humanity and how they were contributing truly to the improvement of civilization. That is what gave real meaning to me. So when I wrote poetry, I tapped into the real essence of my humanity, which brought me the highest joy. That is why clowning for me has been my greatest happiness, because to give happiness to another evoked it in me. When I saw them smiling, I was smiling. What you do for another returns to the self is the philosophy behind that. If we all become siloed on laptops and iPhones and we allow our children to pick them up and rewire the neural networks in the brain, because that's what happens if a child is constantly focused on technology, they lose the ability to socially connect. They don't pick up the social cues. Empathy dissolves. Bullying increases. Social isolation increases. Depression and anxiety become exponential, because that soothing that happens through relationship, the feeling of belonging, the feeling that people like you, that you are loved, this is the actual connectivity with the social fabric that is not understood in Silicon Valley by young men sitting on computers primarily, who have no concept of the deep and evolutionary bonds between family members, between friends. You will have friends yourself, of course, and you've come from families. But when you spend your life in technology and believing that this is your universe and that everyone should have your universe, you're quite incorrect. There are real consequences to putting 6 billion people on technology and connecting them all. It's going to have real ramifications for peace in our world. People will lose connection to what peace is. I see a lot of sadness in a future like that. That's why I'm doing everything I can to communicate my truth through these videos. Now, it continues on to say the industrial legacy of climate chaos fills us with dismay, remorse, and fear. As surveillance capitalism becomes the dominant form of information capitalism in our time, what fresh legacy of damage and regret will be mourned by future generations? I really feel this deeply, the mourning in the future, if we continue down this trajectory. It's heartbreaking. By the time you read these words, the reach of this new form will have grown as more sectors, firms, startups, app developers and investors mobilise around this one plausible version of information capitalism. This mobilisation and the resistance it engenders will define a key battleground upon which the possibility of a human future at the new frontier of power will be contested. And that's, of course, what I'm saying. And it's also in my inner feeling too. I just know that the humanity will not accept this. That for the moment, people are not realising the ramifications of allowing their data to be gathered without their knowledge, and the intrusivity into their lives, particularly through smart meters that are not just measuring electricity but actually can monitor what's going on in the house. The smart televisions, I know, having been a researcher with people panels, that they're looking through the smart televisions in order to observe behaviour in the home. The electricity supply being used is documented, the amount of appliances. This is way, way too intrusive to be able to move onto a street. I don't want to travel half a day and have 900 cameras capture my image. So for the sake of my own statement here, I do not give permission for surveillance on any level. I don't want surveillance. I recognise for the moment this is what's going on. I don't agree to it. Having been a market analyst myself, I know that you're not doing it for my highest good. And I certainly do not believe what we're creating here is going to lead to sustainability. The marginal improvements in saving of power because of sensor lights is not, in my view, the panacea for sustainability. What I do know is until peace becomes the central paradigm of our society, that is coming to peace with who you are, healing our very disruptive childhoods, learning appropriate parenting where a child is secure, not sending them off to childcare centres where they get further detached from their mothers. I've worked in childcare centres and the children were calling the carers mother or mum. This is not what we want. And to put them onto devices at very early ages rewires the neural networks. I have been informed by primary school teachers that they're seeing behavioural changes, that the children are not resilient. They're saying that they need more and more instruction because of the linear nature of working on technology. This is not for their highest well-being. Socialisation is critical in early childhood and certainly primary school. Functional families where parents are present, not being distracted from iPhones. Another piece of information I've learned is that when a mother tends to a message that pings on her phone, it actually disrupts the child learning. So if that parent is engaged with a conversation with that child or teaching them something, it actually can affect the child's ability to learn. They're saying that a child learns far more effectively through a human teacher than through a video. So this is something to take on board. If the neural networks are being changed because of the constant focus on a screen, how does it impact the eyes? If biometrically people's data or identity is being gathered through their eyes, their thumbprints on their phones. I know some people are opening phones through digits. This is something to be very concerned about, one's own fingerprint. If all information goes online and there's no more cash economy, how does that impact the homeless who can't get access to food? How does it impact those who can't comply with the system for one reason or another? It could be mental health, disability, or simply conscientious objection. What happens to them if they are rendered non-compliant, demerit points stripped, anything that accesses them to public utilities stripped? Is that what's coming? And these are questions that we need answers from those who are standing and representing these new technologies, these transformative digital realities, these smart cities that are being promoted all over the world. We need to have real public dialogue, not just people saying we have engaged with society and the majority of the people don't know anything about it. If you're going to do community consultation, it has to be broad-based. I certainly have heard from those engaged in trying to communicate the smart cities reality that some community consultation has happened through councils, but not much. What has certainly been said to me is that this can't be stopped. Well, it can. If the world doesn't want it, it will be stopped. You have to consult everyone on this. Now, some may not want to do that, particularly if it is intrusive intelligence gathering. They won't want it. Therefore, the society has to deal with that as well. So this is a fairly confronting video, this one, and I know there will be people watching this who are not keen on it, but this is what democracy is about. It's called the clashing it up. We have to speak up and dialogue about matters that impact us directly. Every single human being has a right to have a say. And certainly for this moment, I certainly have the internet, so I can do that for the moment. And this is my contribution to stimulate thought and discussion in intelligent ways for the betterment of humanity. Thank you. Bye.